So we are very excited to have the #1 ranked leadership coach in the world in Dr. Kauffman. She's a 30-year professor at Harvard. She's a visiting professor at the Henley Business School. She's the founder of the Institute of Coaching. She has over 40,000 hours of practice with C-level leaders, elite athletes, and creatives. To put that in perspective, if you divide that by 40 and figure out like how long that is, that's like 19 years straight of doing that. And she is one of the top 8 coaches in the world, according to the Thinkers 50. And she is the author of the book that we're going to talk about today, which is Real-Time Leadership. So we are incredibly excited to have her with us today. Unfortunately, we do not have.
I have it.
Oh, we have our introduction. I thought we didn't have it. So Kathy, hit it. Big thank you to Mike Perlow for the introduction. Carol, what did you think of that?
It's a little understated.
Little understated, I know. We should have gone a little bit more over the top. I am absolutely thrilled to have you with us today. Every conversation that we've had to date has been really fun and enlightening. So we're excited to talk about your book and your career, which has been incredible. Let's start with what, after all these years of working with leaders, what was the motivation to write the book, and what were you hoping to deliver to people?
Okay. Well, the truth that many of you know, but most people don't, is that leadership sucks. It is so hard. You can't say what you really think half of the time. People think you have power. They don't. My people say, like, everybody owns me. I'm like, that's because they do. And just seeing kind of like the real inside world and wanting to like help these people that I care about. And pulling from everything I know. And we haven't mentioned my co-author, David Noble. The book really was his idea in a lot of ways, based on years of our work together. And he comes from the perspective of being an operating executive, starting the world's first digital bank. And so if you guys get to read the book, hope you do, it's not your typical leadership book in terms of leadership book. It's also a bit of a business book. And so it's kind of a little bit of one-stop shopping. But basically, it's times are crazy. You know, like who here thinks that like the big disruption is behind us, you know? But more it's like if you're like in a paraglider looking down and at any moment, a turbulence could send you tumbling. That's what leadership is like. And you need to do things in real time, hence the title of the book.
Yeah, love it. Love it. The book is based on a framework that I think is really interesting. Walk people through the MOVE framework,
Sure.
because I love that acronym, and I think it's really powerful.
Okay, great. I would love to. I'm going to back up one step. One thing is the book is, it's very much an evidence-based book, but when you read it, you can't kind of tell because it's sort of zippy stories told like fiction, by the way, not like cases. But it's based on a lot of, multiple psychological theories, business strategy, military strategy, but our kind of spiritual backbone really comes from an idea from Viktor Frankl. Elle, you know that he was in a concentration camp for 3 years and came out a better person, and then observed who else came out, like who survived, who was crushed, who was colluded. And the statement, that it's a paraphrase, is that between every stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our freedom and our freedom to choose. And the book is really a guide that can take you on a journey to being the best that you can be, but it's a precision guide as well. And ideally one you can use in 10 seconds or less, because who has time these days, like, to do anything? So the big thing, there was a recent study, it was actually 53,000 studies were looked at to see when receiving the treatment you got, what was the outcome? The number one factor is psychological flexibility, and real-time leadership is all about that. How can you, and here I'll take you through the MOVE, how can you, be mindfully alert, aware of what's going on around you, what you need to do, but also mindful of what's happening, but also alert like an athlete, and trying to be able to see what's coming at you, what you need to do. So it's like, what do you need to do? How do you need to relate? And who do you want to be? So it's like alert to the demands of three-dimensional leadership. So you can double and triple click on each one, but it comes down to the split-second question of, what do I really need to do? Who do I need to be right now? And how do people need me to relate? So that's the M in a nutshell. O is to be an options generator, because you can have all the grit and the willpower in the world, but if you just have like one pathway forward and you hit a brick wall, it's really not going to get you where you need to go. So in addition to willpower, you need way power, and that's the options generator. And there's an HBR article in January, February issue called The Power of Options. That's an excerpt of, part of the book. So that's the mindfully alert. So like noticing new mind, but alert like an athlete, not just grit and willpower, but flexibility on ways to get somewhere. Then V is to validate your vantage point. The enemy here is ego, thinking you're right, or reverse ego, thinking you're wrong. But how do you validate your vantage point? Either shoring it up or really checking it out, and ways to do that. And then E is all the ways that you can engage and affect change on an individual level and its scale. And that's and to give you a flavor of the book, there's 3 chapters on M alone, 3 chapters on O, and then longish chapters on V and E, with stories of different clients that we've had.
I absolutely love it. So with 40,000 hours of experience,
I'm 110.
You've seen a lot. What would you say in your experience working with C-level and athletes and creatives and all kinds of folks in the leadership space? What are maybe the top 3 things that you see consistently that people are getting wrong?
The biggest enemy is ego. Basically, it can blind you, it can make you impulsive, it can so that's sort of it. And how does that show up? Scene change for a moment. In the leadership literature, when people talk about bad leaders, they talk about narcissism, sociopathy, and I forget what the third triad is, but it's something bad. As opposed to most of bad leadership is a side effect of the kind of pressures that leaders are under that would crush an ordinary person. And the behavior that doesn't serve them, I think, is side effect of that. They're accidentally diminishing other people, as Liz Wiseman would say, not purposefully. So I'm part-time at Egon Zender. Some of you all may know that. It's a search firm that's now turned into a leadership advisory firm. I've trained like 400 of their consultants over the past 5 years. And they did a survey of 1,000 CEOs in 2021 with an annual revenue of 4 trillion. So these are not like startups. And they asked each one, I love this question, what have you been told is your Achilles heel? And it was, don't listen, talk too much, and you're impatient. So that's really I'd say that's really helpful to coaches, because those are the 3 behaviors that, you can actually work on.
As a coach and looking back at history, would you say Steve Jobs is a good leader or a bad leader?
Yes.
Tell me more.
Well, one of the things we have to be careful about are leadership fads. And we may be a little too flat and lovey-dovey at the moment. On the other hand, I'd like to believe that it would have been great if Steve Jobs had had a partner who could have filed his nails a little bit. But I mean, who's to argue with that kind of incredible impact? Was he a nice guy? No. Were a lot of these other people nice guys? Well, maybe nice, but so I truly do not know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly complicated, but we're all grateful to him.
Yeah, it is very complicated because does the end justify the means? And we're all love the products and all of that, and certain
the interesting question I'd love to
aspects.
hear from you guys is what you think of Musk. That one I think is really fascinating, because all the people I know, I mean, people didn't flee in droves when Stephen Jobs showed up. I mean, people were unhappy, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
That one I think is more interesting and more complicated.
Elon Musk is an interesting study, kind of like Jack back in the day at GE.
That wasn't crazy.
No, true, but polarizing. I think very polarizing, and in some ways ahead of his time. And I thought he was one of the more interesting leaders.
Yeah, there's some really interesting chat things going on, by the way. But that's really interesting is Brian is just saying you need know people. So I don't know how many of you guys know people who worked for Elon. I know about 5.
Mm-hmm.
And they're super, I mean, they're all C blank O's at like big places.
Yeah.
Said it was just like impossible. It was abusive.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what he's accomplished is amazing. I mean, so I think we cannot pigeonhole people.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between, I think what he's accomplished and certainly what Steve Jobs have accomplished is amazing. I don't know that they're great leaders.
Right. Oh, you know what? That's a good differentiation. Who has had a huge impact on our world and who are great leaders.
Right. Yeah. Jeff Bezos is another good example. I get mixed reviews from people that have high-level jobs at Amazon. There's no doubt he's changed the world. Some people love him, some people not so much. So it's very interesting.
But it is also, I mean, I've worked with a number of leaders. So I for some reason really like naughty leaders. And naughty as in they're sort of gorillas and they just scare the crap out of everybody, but they're good-hearted. And I have found them capable, really significantly capable of change when they realize the impact that they're having on other people and that they are actually hurting people who are going home and are unhappy, and it's affecting their marriages. And so typically what you need to do with that group is first really bond with them. Because if you don't really kind of love your client, I think you don't have the right to super confront them.
Mhm.
think that's true in general, that your caring has to be greater than your confrontation, or it's like an offsides foul. But when you do really bond with them, then they really let you smack them around.
Mhm.
And they are open, but you have to not be shaming them. And you have to really have entered their world and understand what's happening to them. And so I do wonder if some of those people, I don't wonder about Musk. I think Musk has got a very rigid personality.
Yep.
But for the others, if they had someone they would listen to, would they have done things just a little different? Not a lot different, but just a little different.
Do you think leadership is different? So we tend, when we talk about leadership, we tend to have these discussions. Bezos, Jobs, Jack Welch, Elon Musk, forgetting there's only one CEO, but within Tesla, there are thousands of leaders. Within Amazon, there's thousands of leaders. Within Apple, there's thousands of leaders. Do you see the things you need to be an effective leader, are they different for a CEO as they are for a line manager?
Yes and no. I mean, I do think CEOs have a burden on them that the line manager does not. I think the demands on them to be like, get the numbers, create a psychologically safe environment, have high expectations, be the comforter in chief, manage the investors, be the representative to the outside world, can't say what you think. So I think being a CEO is inherently different. Now,
Yep.
what is it that's the same? I think that we all need the kind of flexibility and agility that I was talking about. We all need to know, okay, I walk into a situation, what do I really need to get done? Whether you're a CEO or a line manager, you look at your people, and this is like one of the things in being mindfully alert. It's okay, I walk in, there's people around the table. What do I need to do? And so you can think, what I need to do now is make a decision. But what if what you need to do is create alignment on your team? Or what if you go in and you think your job is to create alignment on your team, but no, you've been dilly-dallying, your job is to make a decision. So how can you kind of know that? Then the next one is who do you want to be? Who do you want to be like right now? And so when you're with that group, how can you be your best self? How can you know you're being your best self? And one woman that we know, who is the CEO of a gigantic platform company, we were in a group and she loved the question, who do I want to be right now? And one of the things I've challenged people to do, and by the way, I'm going to challenge you guys too, which is in every meeting you have today, tomorrow, whatever, right before the meeting, ask yourself, who do I want to be right now? Particularly if it's a tough meeting. So like a report comes to you and they've done a job and you're like, it's like, okay, who do you want to be right now? Or if you're, who do you want to be right now? If you're avoiding it, who do you want to be? If you're diving in, who do you want to be? How do you need to relate right now? So this one woman, I love this example. She asked herself that this is a couple of years ago, year and a half ago, COVID's still on, 16th Zoom of the day. She's ready to just like fall on the floor, start weeping. And, and so she's about to go into that meeting and she just paused for a second. Because remember, I said you do this in 10 seconds. It's like you pause 1 second, for each question. So she paused and then you see which question surfaces for you. You don't have to ask all of them. But she's like, okay, who do I want to be right now? And then in that second, because our brains work really fast, the thought that came to her was, wait a minute, the least important meeting of my day is the most important meeting of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And then a very different her showed up. And so much of leadership is kind of what you emanate rather than what you say, And then the next one is like, how do I need to relate? Which isn't how do I want to relate to you, but how do you need me to relate to you? So that I can, we can work more in alignment, and also, again, how to be flexible. So that's something we talk about a little in the book, which is the golden rule, the platinum rule. Golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated. Platinum rule, treat others as they would want you as they would want to be treated. And imagine an extrovert and introvert. Okay, introverts having some challenges, the extrovert comes in, let's you know, and the introvert's like, leave me alone. And then the other way, you've got the extrovert in trouble, the introvert voice, and with the boss and thinks, oh, surely this person just needs some space. And then this person feels dejected. So how do others need you to relate? And that gets much more subtle with cognitive style, stuff like that.
I think, leadership is so fascinating to me. I think very few people stumble into the C-suite, but lots and lots and lots of people stumble into leadership because they were very skilled at being, let's say, an individual contributor. And then by some magical thinking, we assign the skill set that they had that made them successful as an individual contributor as what will make them a good leader. And most people that I talk to in my talent strategy work, they say, I want room for growth. I say, what do you mean? Well, I want to get into a leadership role. And I always ask them why, because you kind of got to be a glutton for punishment, because to your point before, leadership sucks. You really sacrifice a lot to be a leader. What are your thoughts around, and how do companies avoid putting the wrong people into leadership roles, which can just destroy a company culture?
I have no idea. I mean, really, I think that's just such a massive HR challenge and talent challenge and the leadership capacity challenge and the values of the company. I think there's so much, certainly at Harvard, they have their leadership philosophy is eat your young. So it's not the most benevolent environment. And the person with the longest publication wins. So you're not going to change that. You can try, but what you can do then is try to get a culture of coaching in there so that these people get coaches. And I, by the way, fall into that category myself. I was an editor-in-chief of a journal. I was this, I was that. And then this woman who, by the way, happened to be my coach, gave me $2 million to start the Institute of Coaching, to which I said to her, are you out of your mind? I said, doesn't it bother you in the slightest that I have never led anything in my life? And she goes, nope. Have you heard of this thing called leadership coaching, Carol? So I came in as I'm like the perfect bad example, except that I knew I needed coaching right away. It's a subject matter expert. At least I knew I didn't know. So give myself, I didn't know how to do a meeting. I didn't have to do anything. But in addition, I was a founder. And I also did the mistakes of founders, which is, we're going to get this boulder up the hill. If someone's lying in between the boulder and the goal, sorry, just like push it up the hill. And then I had to learn, you can't do that, basically. And then, so for example, I'd be in a meeting and I was realizing that I would, I was there to correct things because I knew Harvard, I knew where we were going, et cetera, et cetera. I liked my job, right? Wrong. And so what I did is in a meeting, I came up with a new outcome variable, which was instead of being helpful, my outcome variable was if there was so much conversation going on in the room, there was no room for me to say anything. That was success. As opposed to I'm doing a lot of tweaking. So I think that's one of the reasons I like to work with bad leaders is I've small scale made most of the mistakes. And the best thing of all though is I also left. I graduated, I replaced myself. I've done that twice now. And the institutes and another thing, they're thriving, one is 7 years later is thriving. And the institute I just left as a major leader 2 years ago and it's thriving. So.
Phenomenal. Last question, because we have so many people that want to ask you questions.
Sure.
I would be remiss. So we're in our community, we have a saying that anyone can be ordinary, but we all have the power to choose to be extraordinary. And you conclude the book, your conclusion is be extraordinary. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So basically it's, okay, back to that stimulus and response and the space in between. Extraordinary is living in that space. Like that's where you live all the time, where you are able to respond to what's happening in the moment, doing the right thing, being the right person, relating in the ideal way, knowing whether we didn't talk about options generator, but like when to lean in, when to lean back, when to lean with, et cetera, and to be able to live your values and to allow other people to live theirs and to be able to be centered. So I think it's about, what's the good that you want to do? I think it's living your purpose. And when you know your purpose or your sense, to not hold back. Like if you see something and you think it's good for the world, don't hold back, do it.
I love it. All right, we are going to get to questions because boy, do we have a long list. So I don't know that we're going to be able to get to everybody, but we'll do our best. So
Sure.
I'll call out two people. So you're thinking of your question, try to make it as succinct as possible. First, we're going to Brian Pullman, and then we're going to Bruce Shutan.
Thanks, Carol, for being on today. Super insightful chat we've had so far. My question for you, a lot of the clients I deal with don't understand their strengths or their values, but most of my clients are actually below C-suite. So my question for you is, as an executive coach, how often do you find these people that are leading others haven't done the work they need personally to understand what fulfills them, or what drives them?
Yeah, I remember working with one guy, and he was a CEO, and I was like so shocked that he had the insight of a gnat. I'm thinking, how in the Lord's name did you get so far and know nothing? And then I realized that when he was, 22, 23, he strapped himself in that jet fighter, that fighter jet, and his career just took off. And he'd never really had time to land. And the company he was in didn't do offsites, didn't do the kinds of things where you can land for a little bit before you take off. So that's one thing. So I think a lot of them don't know their strengths. We're trained to know our weaknesses. And I have a quick coaching model, which I can share with you. And what it is say, what's an example of what one of your clients might want to work on? If you just pull something from the air, Brian.
The 3 use cases I help with are landing a job in tech, promotions, and then career clarity, because a lot of people, because of COVID, are kind of realizing they want a job that's different than what they have currently.
Okay, and what would be like a leadership issue they would want to work on in the context of that?
So from a leadership perspective, a lot of the technical people get to a point where they realize that knowing things and having opinions about things aren't enough to sway other people. Like they have to learn to bend a little bit more than they have. And a lot of these folks that got into tech originally, I'm going to paint broad strokes here, but they didn't love people, which is why they went into tech. And then they hit the ceiling where they're like, oh man, like I have to learn how to work with people now because I can't push my way through this, or be tenacious. Problem solving is not enough anymore, right?
Yeah. So for that, let's say we're dealing with a tech guy and what he needs to do is basically be more people friendly. Now, unless he's Attila the Hun or possibly like Musk on the spectrum, what you can do is to say, okay, like if you were, let's say the particular skill taken from our 3 was listening, or with your people as they're looking for work, it's tenacity. What you would say is, okay, if you were first they say like, why does this matter to you? And the challenge with some of your people is they don't have intrinsic motivation to work with people, but you can pull on their extrinsic. If you don't have intrinsic, okay, fine. Here's your extrinsic. How expensive is this going to be if you don't work on this, right? And then as people work on it, they often discover they like people a little bit more than they thought. But the thing is, okay, so if I was a 10 out of 10 on tenacious, or if I was a 10 out of 10 on being better with people, or even I want to like people and I don't. Okay, what would you look like at that 10 out of 10? Like, what would you be seeing? What would you be feeling, et cetera, et cetera. Then on that scale of 1 to 10, where are you now? Okay, so let's say the person says, I'm a 4. Then the next question, what are you doing right that you're not a 3? That's where that gets to the heart of your question about understanding their strengths. Not in a theoretical way. They can take out Strengths Finder and this and that. It's like, what are you doing right already with people? Then what else are you doing right? And what else are you doing right? And you just hammer that home. And then, like, to the point where they're drooling, then you say, what can you do over the next 4 to 6 weeks to get from a 4 to a 4.5? Now they've primed themselves with things that they've done right, and that's not easy. I often deal with them competitively by saying, listen, if I asked you your faults, you'd probably be way better at this. But identifying what you do right is much more cognitively complex and difficult. So let's try that one.
Love it. Bruce Shutan, then we're going to Carl and then Shannon.
Carol, thank you so much. Really have enjoyed all of your insight. I'm curious as to how you would assess the biggest leadership challenge of the century, which was how leaders responded to the pandemic. When we were in lockdown a little over 3 years ago, and we still see the push-pull between those like Elon Musk who want to go back to 9 to 5, and a lot of other people in the workforce, especially younger people who want to work remotely, want to be digital nomads, or have hybrid options. And obviously this complicates leadership. So I'm wondering kind of where we go from here.
Yeah, I see. Just a trite question. I do think that it's individual, company by company, person by person. But I think when we talk about needing flexibility, you've never needed it like now. And what kind of leadership is required of you, I think, shifts a lot, because I supervise like a whole bunch of leadership coaches. And when the pandemic first hit, they all were going like, Carol, my leaders are regressing. I go like, what do you mean? Well, they're just all being directive and this and that. I'm like, well, why are you calling that regressive? That could be what's needed now. I don't know how many of you know the work of Knevin, but it's like different kinds of situations. Chaos really creates for need for more directive leadership. But then once you just get to complex and not quite so chaotic, then you should shift to a different kind of leadership, depending on what you need. I think the hybrid thing is really hard. I'm working with a couple of places that have just said, get back to work or get out. And I have a hard time with that, but that was their read of what their company needed. And when I'm at their places, everyone does look pretty happy. I think that the future, you just can't put it back in the box. I think that we've got more complicated layers of cultures, layers of, what people want by age, by personality, and, sort of like just wake up and smell coffee. That's it. But then there's also a lot of digital skills that are needed. Like there's the new skills that you need to lead online, where you have to be much more aware, say, of your voice tone. You've got to be much more aware of your messaging. One of the big problems in all leadership is that the signal you send may not be the signal that's heard. And I think then when you're talking about Zoom, email, etc., that just gets tougher. So again, you guys are asking good questions, because my fundamental answer is I don't know. And I think we don't know. And supporting our leaders that it's okay that they don't know.
Yep. Carl and then Shannon.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Hi, Carl.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon.
Okay,
So
now
my question is,
trying to figure out what kind of car you're in. Go on.
Jeep.
I like that's a Jeep. Right.
So from your experience, let's say from the summation of encounters that you've had thus far, for the leaders who, or for the individuals who are the epitome of leaders or leadership, is there a common denominator between those individuals? Like, let's say if they have similar daily routines or habits, like, is there a common denominator between the best leaders that you've worked with?
That's a great question. Well, I think that the two qualities I think that all the leaders need, and this was identified, I don't know how many of you guys know Sir John Whitmore. He wrote a lovely intro to coaching book called Coaching for Performance. And he basically started a business coaching field in the UK, which then came to the US. And, you know, he says the two things are self-awareness and self-responsibility. That I think if you are a leader, that is what you need. And that's back to Brian's question. You need that as the CEO, and you need that as a frontline worker. Self-awareness, your impact on others, and taking responsibility and not going into automatic blame, even when it is mostly someone else's fault, not going to blame, but like, what was my role? So I think that's kind of the backbone. I think that's what being extraordinary is about. In terms of routines and habits, the big one that I've been working with lately, because most of my leaders are like, you know, like my brain is going to explode. So in the self-care routine, if you say to people, okay, listen, it's important to take a break during the day. It'll reset you or whatever. How many people do it? I don't know about you, but none of my guys do. Are you kidding? They're like, I've got 16 meetings and blah, 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 blah. What they will do, however, is I just did this with one guy this morning. And he's like, you know, I have like, you know, 15 half-hour calls like in a row. And, you know, various like big leaders. And so if I say take a break, he's like gonna just vomit, I think. So what I say is, okay, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to end your 30 minutes meetings 3 minutes early if you can, so that you get a break between code switching. So if you say, like I said, like you need a break code switching, your brain needs a break for code switching. Take 2 minutes off for neurological optimization. When I say go for neurological optimization rather than take a break, then they do it. So that's like, I think there's like mini routines and mini habits that make the difference.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's a great, yeah.
Isn't that neurological optimization? I'm so pleased with myself.
I love it. I love
I
it.
came up with that idea.
Shannon, you're up, and then we are going to Scott Garber.
Oh, thank you. Just a quick question. Curious if you have plans for translation to Spanish, other languages, anything out there in the mix for your book?
God bless you. From your lips to HBR's ears. I assume they will at some point, because I think the book will do great in Japan, because one of the people who's a proponent of the book, a strong proponent of the book, is a sort of a legend in Japan. And he was one of the people who went from really tough. So if you want to, he's in, I think we've got a chapter called Move Strategically, whatever, that's basically war stories. He was the guy there who yelled at people and said, here was his leadership style. This was important to the company. You have failed. You should just get out of this company, and you should die. That's where he started. He then discovered that positive leadership was much more powerful, and he couldn't get over it. So it's up to HBR. And I think most of their books get translated, but I'd like this one to get translated into Chinese and Japanese at least.
Thank you.
Mr. Garber.
Carol, hello. All right, before I ask my question.
There you are. Okay, hold on. I've got to change my screen group from view to speaker so I can see you better. Okay.
I was going to ask, what car am I sitting in for $1?
Can't do it. I just know that it's got something where you can have your dog in the back.
Yeah, that's right. We got 2 of them. But look, this has been incredible. I can't wait to dive into your book and appreciate your time. You know, I'm doing a lot of work now in the youth sector, using gratitude and golf to teach these leadership lessons, develop future leaders. And so there's a ton of lessons wrapped up in both of them. But, you know, earlier in the call, you mentioned ego.
Yeah.
And it's something that's very fascinating, where in the capitalistic world that we have, I think it's a necessary component. But I think without balance of ego, the mindset that it becomes pulverizing, right? It's too much. And so I'm curious, we talk a lot about this reactive approach when they make it to the C-suite or into a leadership position. Any suggestions or thoughts as we capture the minds of these younger folks to help develop that mindset so that it's not so much of a 180 or a tidal wave when they do land that role in the future?
Lovely, lovely. Well, I think you're doing the right thing by working on gratitude. Gratitude is the antidote to ego, basically. So it's like, okay, so I did this. Who are all the people that helped me do that? You know, when we say it takes a village to do something, like, we're not kidding. So one is I would reward them a lot for gratitude. The other one is, you know, what are the benefits of ego? The benefits of ego are sort of determination, an internal locus of control, all kinds of things like that. That's healthy ego, you know?
Correct.
So it's, you want to be, if a healthy ego is here, you've got the chest beaters on this side, that give ego a bad name, but then you've got the people, the chronic self-doubters on the other side. Oh, I can't do this, you know, I can't market myself because people aren't going to like me, to which I say that is equally ego-driven. The thing ego-driven is the chest thumpers. It's also the big avoiders. And by the way, we can be both. We can be a chest thumper in one situation and a little wimp in another. But how to sort of get to, I think the antidote for ego also is purpose. Like I don't know why I'm here, but there's something about, you know, putting out fires, or like, you know, getting things done, or working with teams, or helping individuals that's sort of in there. And one thing I think is a purpose, when you do purpose work, it's not something that you necessarily discover. It is something you uncover, you know, and it's there, and their core purposes are already there in these kids.
Very cool. I'd love to connect with you and further the conversation. It's really neat, you know, just the impact that gratitude, switching that mindset from scarcity to abundance, takes care of a lot of these issues, right? It's, you know, it just removes the expectation from the scenario. But again, thank you for your wisdom and you know, what you bring and contribute to the world.
Thank you. It's also like what I say to a lot of people, it really, you don't have to go crazy if your kid doesn't make the top tier school. What's important is your kid loves to learn and feels loved, but not cuddled. You know, so how do you create a child with a good, secure attachment that feels good about themselves and that they really want to do well, but not that if you're not at the top, you're nothing. Because that's really the parents' anxiety. By the way, guys, what I realized after the book was outside my little clammy hands is it's actually a parenting book. Whole book is a parenting book. You know,
Okay.
so
I need that.
the 30-second story. Okay, so I walk into the dining room and there's my son, Michael, with this hellhole of a mess in front of him. I walk and he goes, "Mom, hi, I'm done with my homework. Can I go watch TV now?" Okay, so automatically, remember we're saying the split second question, what do I need to do now? Automatically you think, we'll get this homework done. But in this case, I don't know what helped me, but I went, wait, is that really what I need here? Is it something about discipline? Is it something about loving learning? Is it something about watching my head not pop off and roll down the driveway because this is the 37,000th time, like, I want to watch TV. So in this particular case, so that's what I needed to do. But who did I want to be? At that point, I want to be someone who has enough emotion regulation that I can make a choice. Space, right? That's what I space. And then how does he need me to relate? You know, and then we didn't do the options, but does it need to be really actively engaged, sort of step back and think, be caring, or to not respond at all for at least a moment? And I did, in this case, I actually did the latter for, you know, like half a minute. Like, okay, I'm not going to get triggered into do your homework. So I just, and then the thought came to me, just like the woman who's like, who do I want to be right now? And then said, oh, least important meeting of my day is most theirs. But then popped into my head. I then said, so I go, so Michael, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at your homework and ask yourself a question. Am I proud of my work? And if you're proud of your work, you can go watch TV. And I left the room. And he stayed maybe all of 2 or 3 minutes, you know, and then went to watch TV. But it started something. So when you read the book, it all applies to parenting, like almost every single thing. Wished I'd known that. Wished
Super
I'd known that
Yeah,
before it got out of my hands.
Fantastic.
Very cool.
When
Yeah,
you were
love
talking
to-
about ego before, I watched, and I won't spoil it for everybody, but I watched last night Inventing David Geffen. And it's a pretty interesting look at somebody with a very healthy ego who also really protected his people. So just watching how he became such a powerhouse in the media world, I would highly recommend it. So Inventing David Geffen.
And was that, did you say that was on Netflix or where is that?
Yeah, it's Netflix. It's actually pretty old. I think it came out in 2012, but you would never know it. It's really good.
Oh, that's great.
We're going to Tag, and then we're going to Alex Smith.
Hi, Carol. Thank you, everybody, for this. This
Hi.
is fantastic. What a master class. And I'm kind of glad I'm following Scott Garber because it ties into my question. And Scott and I are looking forward to catching up soon on stuff as well. So I've kind of been in the educational world more so in the K-12 space. Recently, after 30 years, just left it because I finally got to this point. I defined what there's as a leadership vacuum up at the top. And then as Scott was saying too, when we're working with the young people, there's so many executive functioning skills that they're lacking that it is probably one of the biggest struggles right now about leadership, working with youth coaches at the lower levels. Usually there's a kid that's got some little innate natural stuff to be a leader. People are saying there's no leaders. So my question to you is kind of twofold, is the people that are identified at the top in leadership roles, and you had mentioned too, I like the terminology used, that have the side effect pressures
Yeah, right.
that impact. So, you know, the political, basically those pressures, I think, political pressures, their in education, the eye's coming off the ball. It's coming off sound-based educational decisions based on the kids, and they're being made for a whole lot of other different reasons. So you've got a lot of people in between the leaders and the kids, crazy frustrated. So I didn't know if you thought there was certain, you know, what needs to happen to refocus, train, educate today's leaders and developing leaders while also creating the grassroots stuff at the bottom and opportunities so that we can avoid this leadership vacuum that I think really exists today and is now my new passion to figure out how to impact that.
Well, you're making me think of a woman I know named Julie Carrier. And don't be mistaken by her perky exterior. The woman is like a player. And she started something, I think it's mostly for girls, but I think it's completely good for everybody. And I think her website is girlslead.com, but you can Google Julie Carrier. And she's developed a 3-year leadership curriculum for people in high school. And I got to tell you, it rocks. It rocks. So she's now just done it with a couple of schools, and she has a waiting list of 125 schools who are interested because she needs to scale herself and get there and can use whatever kind of help and resources. But it's a remarkable, and and it's also very evidence-based with measures in it. And you know, if you Google her, there's this video of these 9th and 10th graders talking about leadership, and they sound like major leaders. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I think leadership programs, like, you know, this is a graded course that they have to take for, I think, you know, 8 weeks in freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. And it's all about authentic leadership and strengths and understanding other people, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of room to, because these kids are able to be great leaders, but they're, as you say, they're not getting the training. And I do think sports helps, like some of these missing things, but also I was just talking to a CEO earlier today, and he has someone on his exco who's just pushing people like, just deliver, just deliver. And he's like, that's fine, but they have skill gaps. So you can't just deliver if you got a skill gap. So how can you be more sophisticated about areas in executive functioning, et cetera, where you can sort of get better diagnostics so you can help them fill the gaps. And then I think the leaders need to be educated. But it's hard, really hard.
Thank you. No, and thanks for that lead as well. And I look forward, I just ordered your book this morning as well. So I'm looking forward to diving into that. Great stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. We've got Alex, and then we're going to try to squeeze in Paul, and our cleanup hitter today is Jason Starbuck.
Wow, I have so many notes on my phone over here. Carol, you gave me a tool. I'm going to be using who do I want to be right now, and pause. I think my wife and my relationship with my wife just got better from this call. So thank you for that.
All right.
No, I was gonna ask you if you were a fan of Ted Lasso. I didn't want to give any spoilers on this call, but I wanted to tee up my question with that beforehand.
I have only seen a little bit of Ted Lasso, but that's because my husband doesn't like Ted Lasso and been on the road for 4 months. The little time you are at home, you don't.
Yeah, I imagine you don't have a lot of free time. Yeah.
Well,
without doing a lot of
2 episodes, and the 2 I've seen are lovely. I will be sneaking episodes on the side.
Yes, sneak away and take that down because I think you would just
I think the first episode, and I think I saw a recent episode.
Okay. Well, on the last one, they asked the guys all get together for like a support group. They call it the Diamond Dogs, and they talk about all these like relationship issues and leadership issues and all that. And one of them asked, can people change? And in the end, one of the main characters goes, human beings will never be perfect, Roy. The best we can do is keep asking for help and accepting it when you can. And if you keep doing that, you'll always be moving towards better. And,
I love that.
And you're like, my question was going to be around Scott's around ego, because I'm dealing with, my wife has a not a boss, but like a client that she has to work for. Like she's an architect and works for a company. And this woman is super demanding. I'm someone who's like, you can't take vacations. I'll be calling you on vacations. We'll be on our free time at night. She's rushing to do something for this woman, just so, very high ego. And then on the other end, I'm working at a company where, very demanding, all about revenue, layoff, like that sort of thing, a leader that founded the company. And so I guess my question is to change, when you work with somebody with like a very like high unhealthy ego, how do you begin to get that person to change? Because I agree. I think it is one of the poisons of our workplaces. And I want to like help change as a non-leader, someone in a non-leadership role. I'm an individual contributor, but I don't know really how to do it. We have an all hands call, and I want to ask a really good question of our leaders. After kind of not communicating a really bad layoff. There was no communication sent out to employees about it, and it just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, that's just really poor hygiene. And do these people have boards?
We do, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about my wife's company,
but it is interesting to see what are ways to communicate, because a lot of these people, it starts out with extrinsic motivation. I mean, I've had a number of people where the board just throws somebody at me and just says, if you don't have coaching with Carol for a year, you're out. It's like, so what really helps is can somebody higher than them say, you got to work on this. What you're doing may be working well for the numbers right now, but I'm worried about the numbers 3 years from now as well. So very often, how do you go with the extrinsic motivation first and then create the relationship with them and then see what it is they're willing to change? And it's, hi, Jamie. What's hard, the impact they have on people is hard. So why I'm interested, I'd love to talk to you because my next book is sort of about something like this, because then back to the box again, which is, let's say you can't change the leader. Okay, how can you buffer yourself from the negative effects of that leader? How can you, wean them a tiny bit? If the person is really abusive and violating your values, then what's your longer term game of working somewhere else? But while you're stuck there, the big thing is not to let them hurt your relationship with yourself. So for your wife, it would be, do not internalize the pathology of your leader. Your leader may be hard driving. You may or may not be able to meet all of her expectations, but if you don't, you can't, it's not about you. So how do you really keep inside that box? Bad leadership going in on this side. Okay, it's like poor retention, inner resignation. Some people do better work product wise, but the big danger inside is what it does to your experience of yourself. So that's the most important thing. And then come up with a long-term plan. Overwork is one thing, demanding is one thing, but also if it starts to be values crushing, then your personal responsibility might be to be looking elsewhere. And, and I don't know whether or not that person has ears to hear, to say, so, is there someone inside the company at another level who can be doing some coaching of the person? I don't know if they're a founder. It sounds a bit founder-ish. But I would go there. Who are the other people who can influence that person? Because someone underneath them is probably not going to influence them. Well, they might if they consider drop a hint here and drop a hint there and drop a hint somewhere else.
Carol, can we sneak in the last two?
Fine with me.
All right. Paul, you're up. And
My
then
next
Jason.
appointment today is a hairdresser, so I'm not exactly.
Perfect.
Wow. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Carroll. I learned so much, and I'm really just fascinated by your resume. You've been at Harvard for 30 years, and especially today, it's kind of unheard of to see people stick with a job for so many years. And I'm in the process of kind of a pivot where I've been in finance for the past 7 years. I felt like the number one problem for me to solve was to help people achieve financial freedom and live life on their terms. And the pandemic kind of blew a lot of things up with mental fitness. And for a lot of young people, I'm curious for you, do you see social media as being kind of the newest epidemic that a lot of the younger generation are facing? And what type of advice do you have for the younger generation in terms of leadership and leading themselves?
Another small question. Back to the social media thing. I'm gonna go somewhere very different with it. So what's the problem with social media? We've had the equivalent of social media in other ways. Social media is a challenge when, like the last question, you use it to lower yourself and make downward social comparisons with that social media. And I think that's the thing for kids to be really aware of, that these people aren't showing their real selves. They're showing their pretend selves, and they're marketing themselves. And then how can you, I've had the same problem with this thing. One of the worst things that happened to me recently is when I was in London, I was pickpocketed. And so I didn't have my phone for 5 days because I just was insisting that they were going to send me a new one and I wasn't going to buy one. So that meant I was without one for 5 days, although I did have my iPad. Man, oh man, did I discover I have an iPhone twitch. It's just like, and it was sort of like when when you've had a mirror somewhere in your house for a long time and then you move the mirror and you smile at the blank wall and you go like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I didn't even know I did the space whenever I looked there, and unless there's no wall, there's no mirror there anymore. It was really interesting to see how I was continuously twitching with the phone of the email, or trying to keep ahead of things. So I've been trying to emancipate myself a bit from it. Now I now turn it off from at certain, by 9 o'clock at night and then till 6:37 in the morning. But I think, my God, if that's what's happening to me and I didn't grow up with it, like how this is just like threaded into the neural hardware. So I think that is actually a challenge. Not that I really remember your question anymore, but the dangers, and there's also the assets of social media. I mean, my daughter keeps finding jobs when she needs one because of the people that she's linked to. So I think there's the benefits because it's a global world, but then how do you, sort of like binging, how do you like have the appropriate amount of nutrition, but don't binge.
Jason Starbuck, cleaning it up for us. Bring us home, brother. You're on mute.
You're still on mute.
All right, we're back.
Ah.
I made it. Thanks a
Okay.
lot.
I
Well, I'm going
did.
to go kind of a different direction in this, in a sense of ego. And this is something that I think has always been kind of in the back of my mind. We tend to watch a lot of these people. I'm going to use a guy like Mike Tyson. I'll use guys even like Elon Musk and these guys. And we tend to judge them a lot on kind of these extra kind of personal personalities. But when we tend to look at guys like a Mike Tyson, or we look at it, do you believe that if we sat down with them and try to inject maybe, I'm not going to say softer ideas, but during the time of prime, these people's prime, their performances are many times off of that ego. Do you believe that sometimes if we were to take those people and inject them with these ideas and say, now try this, that we would not get what we actually see out of them? Mike Tyson's a great example. If you were to take away that rage and that ego and everything, we wouldn't be talking about him today. If we were to take a guy like Donald Trump and we say, look, take away his kindness, have him inclusive, would he have made differences, right or wrong, whatever that may be?
Mm-hmm.
How many of these people are we trying to control, yet the pressure creates the diamond that we all live in today?
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting. I think the issue is trying to when you take your oath as a doctor to do no harm. Is there a way to do less harm? On the other hand, I was down in New York visiting with a CEO of a company's worth. I can't say how much it's worth because if I actually said how much it's worth, you could figure it out. But we'll just say it's bigger than 250 billion. And and he says my self-esteem goes up and down with the fucking stock market. He's got those big things that you stare at, feel like up and down. And then at some point he said, I need thinner skin. And what I said was, we don't know that's true. Your thinner skin is what helps you know where your things are in the market, and you're connected to the world. So it's not that you need to have thicker skin. It's that, now we sort of go to a fly analogy, but it's like if something comes by and 100 of your antennas start going off, how can we make it that 10 go off instead of 100? So I more find it, and a lot of the chief marketing officers I've worked with is the same thing. It's like, how do you change your relationship to the criticism or to the negativity that comes to you? How do you change your relationship then to the somewhat toxic state you wind up experiencing? Because to fundamentally change will kill your greatness. So I see it a lot that way. It's like, not necessarily. The other way, I think that's really interesting philosophically. Do we need, X% of tough, aggressive leaders to create at least the polarized tension to make society better? Do not know. Although
Because we sure stare at them.
Well, it is interesting though. I did have this conversation once with, in positive psychology, there's a guy pretty famous named Marty Seligman, and he's sort of like the father of positive psychology. So one time we were walking down the street and he's like, Carol, why am I like this? I'm like, why? You're like, what, Marty? He goes, Al Bandura, he's won this award and he's won that award. He's like the number one cited person in the world, and I'm number 2. He goes, why does this bother me? I don't want it to bother me. And I just said, you know, Marty, if it didn't bother you, positive psychology wouldn't be on the map.
Right.
You know, so it's a less lethal example. But yeah, your strength is your weakness. You just don't want it to be lethal.
Thank
I
you very much.
absolutely love this. And one thing that I noticed is your ability and willingness to say, I don't know, is so rare, especially 30-year Harvard professor, expert, #1 coach in the world on leadership. To say, I don't know, shows a level of humility that we don't see very often, and that's pretty cool. So Carol, I can't thank you enough. I love every conversation we have. Thanks for coming on, being a part of this. I know we lost half our tribe at one, but buy the book, leave an Amazon review. What else can we do to support you, Carol?
Great. Yeah, I'm actually at a place now where I'm starting of thinking more of a speaker career. So if you guys know of kind of speaking engagements where I might be a good fit, that would be great, because it feels like I asked my book in my head. I asked my own book. So if my book was a sentient being, what would it want to be done with it? Right. So it's like if it was its own little being, and it would like to be a required course reading in EMBA programs, but it wants me to be more of an evangelist for it, which I think is through speaking. And so that's the newest thing. I'm doing my first 3-camera film speech next week. So I should have a better demo tape, and also figuring out more the heart of the book rather than just the smartness of the book is what I'm doing. So yeah, that would be one thing. And I see someone says you're going to calculate for LinkedIn. For God's sakes, don't do that. The reason being, I have 28,000 followers. I'm terrible at following LinkedIn. I have someone who does it, but unless you say, I know Carol, it won't get forwarded to me. But you've got my email. If you remember my name, you've got my email, because it's carol@myname.com. So carol@carolkaufman.com is the best way to reach me. And tell people about the book.
Yeah.
When you read it, if it feels like, whoa, this is helpful, then recommend it to people.
Yeah, it is absolutely phenomenal, and you are phenomenal. So thank you so much for carving out the time for us today. So appreciated.
All right. Okay. Take care. I'm
Enjoy
the hair.
I know we need a before and after. So please send me a pic afterwards if you're doing something different.
All right. Goodbye,
We'll see ya.
guys. Thank you for
Bye,
being
guys.
here.
Thank you.